Hi everyone, welcome to sketchaday.com. My name is Spencer Nugent, and today I will be going over just some quick tips on casting shadows. Now, shadows are essentially a compositional element that can help ground your sketches to a page. So typically when I sketch, you'll see me do something that's kind of a shape or outline with some cross hatching. So let's just start with a very simple shape here. I'm going to start with a box. And there's a few different ways, three that I'm going to cover today. So shadow is essentially the absence of light. So here I have a representation of a three-dimensional object. I'm going to add just a little bit of line weight to the outside to kind of help this pop a little bit better. So here on the bottom, and all the way around my cube. Okay, so there's my object. Now, the first thing I want to do when casting a light source is decide on casting a shadow rather, is decide on a light source. So the first shadow I'm going to cast is a drop shadow, and I'm going to assume that there is some light source above my object projecting a shadow down. Now this sketch is done kind of in a three-point perspective, so all I have to do really for a drop shadow is project down, decide essentially where my ground plane is in relation to the object. So depending on my height, for example, if this is a nice side view of my scene here, depending on my height, I can then determine roughly how far off the ground my object is. Now, here I have kind of extended the form down, essentially is what it looks like. But if I actually draw through my object, I'm going to do this in green so you can kind of see what these back lines are. So by drawing through, I'm showing almost the X-ray of the shape. I can also project this line down, and you can see that that shadow would be projected from this point A backward, okay, and this other point backward as well. So now I have the outline of my shadow that's cast, and I can go ahead and shade this in. Now I am using a Papermate Flare. You can use the same technique with a ballpoint pen to shade in your areas, or pencil. Just a nice, quick, lively way of shading in those shapes. Now, let's imagine, I'm going to move this to the side here. Let's imagine that we have an indoor light that is projecting a shadow rather, off of a form. So I'm going to sketch another form here, another box, and just for kicks, let's do the back side as well. Now, to project an interior artificial light shadow, sorry, my brain must be fried tonight. To project a shadow created by artificial light source, what I want to do is imagine, for example, here's again that side view. I've got my box and it's on the ground. And let's say there's a lamp right here. You know, if you've all seen these lamps, project some light up, kind of in all directions, right? So I essentially have what's called a point light source. Point light source. And that's located at the center of that bulb, okay? Now, here in my sketch, if you can imagine, there's kind of a ground plane all the way around my cube, right? So really, I can pick any point on this plane on which to position my lamp. I'm gonna pick something like this because looking at my side view, I've got my lamp with its base and the bulb is up top right here. So here's my bulb. And this bulb, or point source, is going to project light toward my object and cast a shadow. So the way we calculate this is you look at these 2 points, A and B, and I'm going to project through each corner as accurately as I can, each corner of the top of my cube. Okay, and then from the bottom here, let's do this in a different color so you can see it. I'm going to project through each of the bottom corners of my cube, and I'm kind of just extending these lines out because what I want to do is identify where all of these intersections are happening. Okay, so I'm going to look at the top of my cube here and the bottom on this edge. So I know that this orange line is intersecting with this line as it projects down. So I have my first point. Okay, I know that from this edge here, I've got this line radiating out, and where this intersects, I've got a second point. Okay, now I can look at this back edge, and these 2 points, I've got one here, and then just for kicks, let's look at this back edge here. Experience tells me what's going to happen, but I'll show you. So if I look at this point labeled A and this point labeled B, and where these project through, right through there and all the way down, gets a little confusing, but I have that point kind of landing right in the middle of the base of my cube. Okay, so just going to bump this outline on the form so you can see what's happening a little bit better. You know, things get a little messy. Hopefully the color helps pull out the detail and explains things just a little bit more. Okay, so there's my form, and now here's the, this pen looks like it's dying. Here's the outline of my shadow. I'll do it in red so you can see. Okay, so I'm going to connect from this point over, and we're just connecting the dots to show you what this artificial light shadow would look like, which is essentially this region shaded in red. Okay, pretty simple, right? So pick a light source anywhere on the ground plane. You can pick the height. So if this is lower, my shadow is actually going to get longer, for example. And you can play around with this if you want. If this gets taller, the shadow is going to move in this way, okay? Because of how the direction of these lines will change as the height of the point light source changes. So what about an object that is situated outdoors, say in a natural light setting? So once again, we'll do another cube here. Okay, so there's my cube. I'm going to project and do kind of my wireframe so we can see what's happening, and just add a little line weight to kind of clean this up and help my form pop a little bit more. This time I'm using a Sharpie because my Papermate Flare kind of quit on me. Okay, so here's my form resting on a surface, some imaginary ground plane. Now, the sun essentially is a point light source as well, meaning, you know, if we could look at the sun, it would look something like that. As it is far, far away. Now, because the sun is so far away, for all intents and purposes, we can interpret the light to be traveling in parallel lines, okay, in our scene. So even though it is a point light source, because it's so far away, we're just going to interpret, sorry, I'm just adjusting my exposure there. We're going to interpret those light rays to be moving parallel. So all I have to do really is just pick a direction. So let's just say this is one of my light rays. Sorry, I made a mistake there. I drew that in black when I meant to draw it in this orange. So let's say that's a light ray. So all I have to do now is just kind of match the direction, okay, and project down. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just pick anywhere, just like I did with my point light source. Pick anywhere around this sketch to set the direction that the shadow is going to fall. So I can go over like so, but all these lines are now parallel. And by finding the intersection points, here's 1, looking at this edge, here's 2, looking at this edge, here's 3, and again, experience tells me that my 4th point is going to rest on the inside base of the cube, so I will see it anyways. And by connecting these dots, okay, I have the outline of my natural light shadow. Now the cool thing with natural light shadows is you can kind of check to make sure that you're doing it accurately, because as I extend these lines from the edge of my object, I can tell that this point's off, because what should be happening is all these lines should appear to converge at one point. Pretty cool way of checking if your natural light shadow is properly constructed. And sketching by nature is kind of an estimation. So if you're a little bit off, don't freak out, but this is the general idea of how you'd construct that shadow. Now, be sure to subscribe or check out some of my other videos, and tell your friends and whoever you think might be interested. When you do subscribe, every time I post a video, you'll be the first to know, because YouTube will send you a lovely email that says, hey, Sketchaday.com's uploaded a new video. And like I said, hopefully I'm trying to work my way up to getting 2 videos a week, but for now, you can rest assured you'll have a video every Tuesday. Might not be Tuesday morning, but it'll get in on Tuesday. So that's my pledge to you. Anyhow, thanks again, and we'll see you next week. So radiating out from the circle, I am easing my line weight as I go this way through my sketch. So now you can kind of see this area is kind of popping a lot more.